Hi everyone, I'm Hugh, Sweeney filmmaker. I'm a professional filmmaker based in Galway City in the west of Ireland, and today I'm going to tell you what I think of the brand new Ursa Mini PRO camera. So a couple of days ago I got an email from Grant Petty, the CEO of Blackmagic Design, saying that there was going to be a live stream on the Blackmagic Design website and to check it out. So I also spotted on the Blackmagic Design, the Ursa Mini Facebook group, I saw a lot of guys were sort of losing their shit with, you know, the images that were released of the new web stream, which basically showed a Blackmagic Design Ursa Mini with this splash of color, this paint dust stuff that they always seem to use for promotional photographs. Not just Blackmagic Design, every camera company has this paint dust at some stage. So all these guys were kind of wondering what new camera Blackmagic Design were going to release. So yesterday evening at about 8 o'clock GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, I tuned in along with many thousands of Blackmagic fans from all around the globe and watched a very enthusiastic but very sublime, relaxed Grant Petty present a video about the latest Blackmagic Design products. I was very excited in anticipation that Blackmagic Design might be releasing a new camera that would appeal to me. Now they did release a camera that does appeal to me, but I was really hoping for another type camera, which I'll get to later in the video. He started out the presentation with talking about the philosophy behind their company, as well as, you know, the attitude towards workflow, color grading in general, how they've sort of revolutionized the filmmaking game, which indeed they have. I mean, they've made cameras like this Blackmagic cinema camera for people like me on a small budget. They've given us these brilliant tools. I mean, this camera is $2,000 and you can actually compare it to an Arri Alexa, which is like $80,000. It's nuts what these guys have been doing. And I've noticed over the years a lot of people complain about them. They actually complain about Blackmagic cameras. Don't buy one if you don't like it. These cameras are awesome. Even the camera I'm filming this with is a Blackmagic production camera. Absolutely awesome camera. Global shutter, internal 4K RAW, €3,000, $3,000. Very cheap camera, brilliant camera. And all people seem to do is complain. But anyway, I'll get back to the point. So the first product that Grant Petty showed us, the viewer, was their brand new budget color grading controlled surface. Now, of course, they're famous for their super high-end worktop 3-part panel with all huge amounts of controls, a big color grading control panel that's about $25,000, which is an absurd amount of money. So last night they released their low budget interface, work surface, whatever you want to call it. It's got the same sort of technology that the big expensive one has. They said the tracker balls are ultimately of the best possible quality. So it's got all these great features. I've been using Davinci Resolve for a couple of years with just the mouse. A lot of guys work with just the mouse. Apparently it's a lot easier and a lot better if you use a controlled surface. So immediately, this thing that costs only $1,000, about €900, is really appealing to someone like me. You know, someone who's using an iMac, who hasn't invested hugely in color grading, to be able to get this really nice device that'll make it easier. You know, because color grading for a lot of us is, it's all about speed. I mean, you might have a couple of hundred clips you want to get through, and you don't want to be spending ages on each one. You want to get it done as quick as possible. So having these individual wheels, dials and balls plus buttons makes it really good. So €1,000 for that, really good. It's called the Micro Control Panel. Here we go. Just going down to it here. I mean, it's a really nice looking device. It's got that machined aluminium alloy metal with a sort of a slightly textured black plastic finish, designed to bring it around in your case, bring it in your bag with your laptop, you know, bring it on set, have a mess around with colors. Really, really nice. It's called a Davinci Micro Panel. And then moving on, of course, we have the larger, bigger brother to this. Now you'll notice that with this guy, this portion here is pretty much the same as a big section of the larger device. Now the mini panel is €3,000, but it's got a hell of a lot going on. It's got this whole top section that's at an angle. It's got little screens here. Very, very nice device. Pretty much the same device from the hinge here down to the bottom. So one thing I noticed was about this, why they didn't make it in 2 parts, so that you know, if you buy this, you could buy the back section. Why not do it like that? So that you buy this, you buy the back section, that way you can put it together yourself. You know, after investing 1,000 in this, you might pay another 2,000 for the back section. I don't know. It looks like it could be done. It looks like that whole front section on the micro panel seems to be the exact same as on the mini panel. But either way, these are great looking products. It's great to see a company like Blackmagic Design investing in its users who are on a budget like myself. So after the announcement of these new sort of affordable color grading control surfaces, Grant Petty then moved on to the release of the brand new Blackmagic Design camera. It is called the Blackmagic Ursa Mini PRO. You heard it, Ursa Mini PRO. 4.6K camera, basically based on their previous camera, which was released about 2 years ago, or it was announced 2 years ago. People didn't receive them 2 years ago. And that was the Ursa Mini, which came in 2 different versions. It came in the 4K more basic version, and the 4.6K with a different sensor. That sensor has more stops of dynamic range, up to 15 stops, whereas the 4K sensor has a lesser dynamic range. It's pretty much the same sensor that's in the Blackmagic production camera. Straight away when I looked at the camera, it just looks like an Ursa Mini that's been given a dose of steroids. It's covered in buttons, covered in way more features than the previous Ursa cameras. So basically with the Ursa Mini PRO, I mean, this thing is an absolute beast. It's 3 cameras essentially in one camera. I mean, these cameras, these Blackmagic cinema cameras, straight away, these were aimed at the sort of indie filmmaker. Very much stripped back features, very little going on, but a great camera in terms of processing power, shooting raw and all that jazz, right? With the Ursa Mini PRO, you've got a hell of a lot more going on. They've taken the philosophy and features and all that from sort of the higher end broadcast style all-in-one type cameras like the FS7 by Sony, where you have lots of buttons on the exterior of the camera that will do specific things. If you want to adjust something in one of these cameras, you got to click a menu, you got to go on the touch screen. Now, having said that, I like using the touch screen. I like doing everything on a screen. Sometimes buttons everywhere isn't ideal for me. Having used an FS7, after using these cameras, I found that there was a lot of buttons to remember. You're switching all over the camera. When it's all on a screen, it tends to be easier for me. The Ursa Mini came in 2 versions, the 4K and the 4.6K. As far as I'm concerned, this new one, this Ursa Mini PRO, is just 4.6K. Now, Grant Petty spoke a lot about the build of the camera. He spoke a lot about the camera being very tough. It's got a magnesium body. And one thing I noticed that he mentioned about the camera that sort of interested me was how he sort of talked a lot about redundancy. In other words, there's so many buttons and features on this camera that if anything happened to these buttons on the exterior of the camera, that you could still control all the aspects of the camera from within the touch screen, which is pretty cool. He mentioned that the on and off switch is now a mechanical switch that you just flick, so that you know that the camera is on, and you can just be walking along knowing that the camera is kind of getting ready to shoot. He also said you could bypass that button with internal switches inside underneath the viewfinder door. So yeah, he mentioned redundancy being important, other ways of working the features in the camera through the touchscreen. So it actually, another thing I noticed about this camera, which I sort of couldn't quite get my head around, was the media that this camera takes. The Ursa Mini PRO takes both CFast cards, which are still relatively expensive, but it also takes SD cards, which are sort of, they're not as expensive. I find them a little bit small and fiddly. They do get damaged, but they're an affordable media. You can buy an SD card much cheaper than a CFast card. He mentioned that the SD cards may not be suited towards the higher frame rate raw shooting. You may need CFast cards for that, but it's got four card slots built in, 2 CFast cards and 2 SD card slots. I'd swap them all for 1 SD slot, but yeah, that's the way they've done it. They've done it smaller, more compact. I mean, it's easy to build up a few SD cards. It's not going to break the bank. Maybe keep 1 good CFast card for when you want to do slow-mo, when you want to shoot raw, and you know, buy another one when you can afford it. The camera shoots in a huge variety of formats, including ProRes, from the highest ProRes 4444 XQ to the more compressed 422 ProRes LT format. I'm not an expert on all these formats, but there's a huge amount of different formats and sizes that you can film with this camera. And of course it's going to shoot RAW. It shoots RAW at 4K 60 frames per second. It also shoots RAW at 120 frames per second, but it's windowed. So that's pretty awesome. You can imagine if you're shooting wildlife, you put a big fat zoom lens on there. You zoom in on some birds. You've got the windowing of the sensor. It's still HD at it's 2K actually, I believe. 2K, it's cropped down. You're getting 4 times the size already of a zoom, and then you got your zoom lens. So these cameras will be great wildlife cameras, great zoom cameras. I know that's not the be all and the end all for people, but for me, I kind of like the fact that it crops down for the slow-mo. So let's see what else we got. Yeah, ProRes and 10-bit, and it's going to shoot 12-bit log RAW as well in this camera. Now that's great to have. I mean, this is a powerful camera. It's aimed at, like, this camera is aimed at so many people. It's a proper high-end, wide dynamic range film camera. That is the ultimate camera if you want to shoot advertising, you want to shoot movies, music videos. You are not going to get better quality than this camera. Probably the most groundbreaking feature on this new Ursa Mini PRO camera was the available lens mounts. Now, this is an interesting area because Blackmagic in the past they've changed their cameras in production to suit the different lens owners. So you're either going to buy a Blackmagic EF mount, or you're going to buy a Blackmagic MFT mount, or you're going to buy a Blackmagic PL mount. What they've done with this camera is they've made the mounts completely interchangeable, which is extremely interesting. But not only are the mounts interchangeable, they're also cheaper. When you bought the Ursa Mini, if you wanted a PL version, you had to spend like $500. With this, you can literally just spend an extra $250 and buy the mount yourself. So you have the EF mount. If you own Canon glass and you want to rent some PL glass or whatever, if you're doing a movie that demands it, requires it, you can just switch over the mounts and then go back to using your own lenses. It's a no-brainer. It's an absolutely brilliant idea. And from looking at Grant Petty changing the lens mounts, it looks very, very simple as well. There's also a Nikon mount available, which I found fascinating. So there's a lot of guys with Nikon cameras, a lot of Nikon glass fans. They're gonna love this camera because you can buy a Nikon mount for this camera. And one thing they've done with the lens mount for the Nikon is they've built in a aperture ring, a really smooth aperture ring. It's built into the mount so that you can mechanically adjust the aperture if you're using Nikon glass. So instead of like pressing a button to change the stops, which is going to be noticeable when you look at your footage, you can just gradually change. Just like when using one of these cine lenses, you can just gradually change the aperture. You know, this is brilliant for when you're wheeling the camera on a dolly from a dark room into a bright room and you want to step down or step up to match the different lighting environments. I mean, that's absolutely powerful. I'd imagine the Nikon version of this mount is going to be very, very popular. The camera also has built-in ND filters, which I think is a great thing to have. Saves you changing your filter on your lenses all the time if you do use an external ND adjustable filter, which I use, which is one of these guys. But it's got it built in, and they said a lot of technology, a lot of design went into the ND filters, which are built into the camera. There's 3 of them, and they maintain that there is no image pollution, so you won't have to compensate for it in post-production. That's pretty cool. The variable NDs shoot at 0 stops, which basically means there's no ND filter in front of the sensor, and then it'll shoot at 2 stops, at 4 stops, and at 6 stops, which is ideal if you're shooting outside on a bright day. So that's great to have in the camera itself. Now, I did notice this LCD. When Grant Petty lifted up the camera, the first thing I noticed was this camera was powered down, and I just saw this kind of old school LCD on the side of the camera, and I just thought it was a little bit uncool looking. Having seen the Ursa camera, the first Ursa, which has got this full color screen on one side of the camera, and then you lift out that massive door, I thought it was a bit of a step back putting this LCD panel on the side of the camera, but they have the reasons behind that, and they maintain that it's visible in complete bright sunlight. No matter how bright the light is, you'll always see the LCD, and it's more about readings than actual monitoring. So it doesn't really make sense to put an image of what the lens is capturing on the LCD. Instead, they have the data that the camera is set to. And that's pretty understandable, and it also lights up if you're indoors and you're in a dark environment. You hit a button and you can light it up. It's got these lock switches as well that I saw mentioned. I mean, you've got so many buttons. That's one of these things about these cameras. So many buttons, and I noticed when I was using the FS7 as well, you're afraid of hitting off something or pressing something. It's got 2 lock switches for 2 sections of the camera, which will basically lock off all the settings so that you won't hit off something and change a button and change a setting. That's pretty cool to have as well. I did notice that with the media slots in the camera that they're when you open the screen of the camera, that the media slots, the SD slot and the CFast card slot, are not covered in the camera, so they're exposed. I don't think that's going to be a major problem, but you know, coming from using cameras like the Canon, where there's a nice neat little flap that just covers over the SD slot, you know, it wouldn't have been that difficult to add something like that. I know it's already inside, but you're going to have that LCD out almost all the time unless you're shooting with the viewfinder. So I just think that they probably could have had a little cover over the media slots. That was something that people complained about with the previous Ursa camera as well. Apparently they've improved the audio on this camera. The audio on the last Ursa was a huge step up above the previous Blackmagic Design cameras. So the audio on this one has got a flatter frequency response, better built-in audio. But again, you know, if you're a professional, you're going to be using those XLR inputs which are on the top of the camera. So they also announced that, you know, it's got the usual battery plate. You buy the battery for this camera. It's not really ready to go. You're going to have to buy power for it separately. So you're going to have to invest in a battery, and you're going to have to invest in a battery plate. Now they also have another product that fits between the camera and the battery, and that is an SSD external recorder, which slots onto the back of the camera. It then takes the battery plate and then you slot the battery on. So you're adding on a little bit of back end onto the camera, but it takes 2 SD card slots, you know, perfect for, you know, lower budget media. I'm sure it'll take all the high frame rates, I'm assuming so. And you've got a cheaper media, it'll shoot for longer and stuff like that with those SD slots. So I like the idea of that. Looking from when Grand Petty fitted it on, I don't think it's a device that's going to cost much more than about 200 euros. It looks very, very simple. So that slots on, it can connect with a cable to the camera in one of the SDI type slots at the back. There's a lot of these slots, a lot of these SDI type fittings in the back of the camera as well, which are exposed. There's a power connection at the back of the camera which is exposed as well. There's no little bungs or covers for these switches like there are on the side of the Blackmagic cameras. It would be nice if they were a little bit more concealed so that you're not looking at these big silver things all the time. Just a little design feature that I amn't crazy about. It's got that massive big rosette on the side of the camera as well, if this camera wants to be fitted onto a special rig where it can be moved around. That's obviously industry standard stuff. One other thing that they've got in there is a still frame button as well. They've got a still frame button where you can just take stills with the camera. A little bit old school sounding, but I'm sure it will get used by certain people. A lot of the controls on the camera are apparently designed with sort of broadcast kind of shooters in mind, where guys are looking through the viewfinder and they want to actually feel around and know where the stuff is. That's not really the way I've been working myself, but it is a good way of working. When you're looking through, you're going to be straight away, you're going to be able to roll the ND filters, you're going to be able to adjust the white balance, the ISO. They've all got their own buttons which are easily accessible with your fingers. So that is sort of what they're aiming their cameras at. People who want that sort of quick response with the camera. They've even got things like a button to shoot in a high frame rate, where you've got your camera set at 24 frames a second or whatever you usually shoot at, and then you just press this button once and automatically the camera will start recording at 60 frames per second, which means that you don't, you know, sometimes it's nice when I'm shooting stuff on these cameras, I gotta go into the menu and I gotta change around settings, and it takes a while to change different frame rates. So just to be able to shoot little short bursts or whatever, especially if you're kind of trying to conserve media and not waste all your cards up with all these huge files, slow format stuff. It's really nice just to be able to hit a switch, bang, take a couple of seconds of something in slow-mo, and then go back to shooting in your 24 frames a second or whatever. So I thought that was a nice feature. They've also got a white balance button that you press it once, it's going to adjust the white balance to the whatever white source that you pointed at, and it also bypasses whatever setting. If you've got it on auto or something, it'll bring it back to a manual setting. Aesthetically, looking at this camera, my thoughts on this camera, what do I actually think of the camera? First up, when I saw this camera released, there was something, when I saw this first Ursa, which is pretty much the same sort of format camera, the first Ursa Mini, there was just something about it that I didn't like, and what that was everything that I do like about this camera, the Blackmagic Cinema camera, which was the first camera from these guys. The Cinema camera has a sort of a retro, different look, whereas the Ursa Mini is a sort of more traditional, standard sort of, shoulder mounted look, which I sort of am crazy about. They've got all these buttons, all these features, and all these switches. A huge amount of manufacturing goes into the actual body of these cameras. Whereas if you look at the camera, which is right beside me here, the Blackmagic Cinema camera, almost no manufacturing goes on the external part of the camera. Almost nothing. Just there's a rubber plate on the back with six buttons on it. There's a button on the front, a flap on the side, and the switches on the other side, and that's it. That's what I like about these cameras, is the minimalness of them. If I had my way, I would swap this sort of all-round, all-in-one FS7 type camera for a more red type camera. I would love to see a sort of a brain type camera where you adjust the whole camera through an external touchscreen, LCD type screen, less buttons, less features, you do it all through the screen. I would actually like that. Or something where it's more modular, where you're not everything is built into the one place. You buy a sort of, you can move around stuff. I don't know, I'm trying to explain what I like. I like the sort of red way of working. But I do think it's a fantastic camera. I have no doubt that this camera is of brilliant build quality. I love Blackmagic Design. I mean, their heart is so in it. Grant Petty is the best CEO of any company I've ever seen. He's a great guy. I mean, look at his hair. Look what he did with his hair. Combed it back for the thing. So looking at the side of the camera again, just to recap, it looks great. I mean, it does look great. I really like it. It's got all these different dials, buttons, and settings. It does look good there. It actually looks nicer there than it does when you've got the viewfinder and all the stuff on it, where it looks more broadcast looking. So who is this camera for? That is the beauty of this camera. It's for so many different people. It's, as I said, for the studio type setup, where guys are using all those studio features like talk back and time code, all that stuff. But it's also for the indie filmmakers. The guys who are filming commercials, fashion commercials, drinks commercials, advertisements, all that kind of stuff, short films, indie filmmakers, feature filmmakers. Why not? I mean, look at the cost of these cameras. They cost $6,000, right? These are going to be used for Hollywood productions, in where they might actually lose a camera. It's much easier to lose one of these cameras than to lose an Arri Alexa, which costs 10 times the amount. Here is a recording of the actual what's going on the side of the camera, which I think looks quite nice. I like the way they do that. They've got card one, they've got all these readouts. The camera's also for people like me, commercial, corporate filmmakers. Most of my work is for companies. I shoot interviews, I shoot products, I shoot demos. This is the ideal camera for me. But having said that, I love the small camera format. I bought this Canon 80D last June purely because my 60D was kind of on its last legs. I had product photographs that I needed done. I sort of like having a Canon camera, so instead of getting like a Sony a6300 or a6500, I went and I got this camera, and people were saying, oh, it only shoots HD. But you know what? It doesn't really matter, because all my videos end up in HD anyway. Nothing is in 4K unless I do something for myself. No clients want 4K. Everyone is uploading things to Facebook. You know, 80% of people are watching stuff on their phones. 80% of videos, they don't even listen to the actual the sound on the video. So let's go to the CVP website. And on the homepage of the CVP website, CVP is a UK company. I'm in Ireland, so these are the guys I deal with. So we got the Chi-X GH5. I mean, people love smaller cameras. That's why the GH5s and the Sony A7Ss are so popular. I mean, there's going to be so many more Sony A7Ss sold than Ursa Mini Pros. I mean, you're going to have 20 times more Sony A7Ss sold. So the price of the Ursa Mini Pro, less VAT, okay, I'm not going to include VAT, is 5,700 euros, right? So that's without the VAT. Now, I will assume that a professional user will be able to claim VAT. So you could buy a standard Ursa Mini for 4,250. So it is 1,250 euros cheaper, okay, to buy the older Ursa at 4.6K. You're still going to get the same image, okay? It's going to be a little bit like, after using the Pro, it's going to be a little bit like painting the house through the letterbox, because you're not going to be able to just hit a button for white balance, switch ND filters. You won't have any of that. So for 1,200 euros, you are getting a hell of a lot more features. So think about that. Now here's the thing. How much money have you got in the bank? Do you have 6,000 euros that you want to spend on a camera? Because if not, you can buy the 4K Ursa for a fraction of the cost of these guys, right? The Ursa Mini Pro is 5,700 euros plus VAT. The Ursa Mini 4K EF, which will capture absolutely stunningly beautiful images, if you know what you're doing, you could buy for 2,500 euros, okay, plus VAT. This camera is 3,200 euros cheaper than the Ursa Mini Pro. It's still got the same form factor. It's still the same size camera, EF mount, still takes cards. It'll do 120 frames a second, all that kind of great stuff. So if you're on a budget, this is still a really good camera, and it's a camera I would actually consider getting. It's got those mic preamps, you know, you plug your audio straight in. Great, it's got a big screen, all that kind of stuff. So an Ursa Mini is still a good camera. That's the 4K one. I'm going to show you some stuff here as I'm talking that I've shot on the production camera, and I've been blown away with the quality I've managed to get, both shooting in RAW and in ProRes. It's down to your composition, it's down to your mind. How good are you at composing an image? That's what it's all about. So realistically, this camera is going to be wasted on a lot of people. It's not about the camera you're using, it's about your skills and your eye. Now here's the thing, this is a great camera, it's full of features, it's a brilliant camera, but it's coming away from the ethic and from the sort of the style of camera that Blackmagic were first known for, which is the Blackmagic cinema camera, which basically is a stripped down camera that just does one thing really good. Okay, it hasn't got many settings on it, it doesn't have a great screen, it won't shoot high frame rates, it doesn't have the best audio and stuff like that, but it shoots RAW internally on a really low budget. So that is what I would love to see Blackmagic Design doing, is making cameras that are cheaper, that have less features, but that just capture a beautiful image. Less of all the broadcast stuff. Us indie filmmakers don't want that stuff, okay? What we do want is a smaller format camera, a smaller sized camera. Look at the A7Ss, why are they so popular? Because they're small, GH5s, GH4s, people love small cameras. If Blackmagic Design made a camera in between the size of the Blackmagic Pocket camera and the Blackmagic Cinema camera that was an improvement on the cinema camera, at about $2,000, 2,000 euros, it would be ball out of the park, huge sales. If it shot 4K RAW at 60 frames a second, if it had a removable battery, if you could see the screen, maybe if you could flip up the screen, or a screen on a hinge, if they made a small camera that could do that stuff, they would sell like hot cakes. If it had a global shutter, all the better. Wide dynamic range, all the better. I'd love to see Blackmagic Design making small cameras. I don't want half these features. I'd like to, they would be a luxury, but I could manage without them. I've got an ND filter I can put on the front of the camera. I know it's not going to be as good as the built-in one, but I can get by on accessories. Give me a smaller camera, please, Blackmagic Design. Thank you very much, guys, for watching this video. I will be back with more camera videos Subscribe to my channel by all means so that you can keep up with what I'm doing. I'm based in the west of Ireland in Galway City and I have a website, hughsweeney.tv. Check me out on Facebook as well, Hugh Sweeney, filmmaker on Facebook. I have about 7,000 followers, 6,500 followers. Check me out there. Also get me on Instagram, Hugh Makes Films _ between 2 words. Hugh _ makes _ films. Thanks for watching, guys. I will be back soon with another video. For now, it's over and out. Peace!